All right, so I think we did this question before, and just to kind of refresh your memory here, the answer was -2. So make sure you have a comfort zone there with that information, and where'd that -2 come from? If you're not sure, you might want to. But in any case, when you ask a question, please be as specific as you can rather than just help Mr. Wizard. Okay? Because I won't know what it was that I said that wasn't clear otherwise, and I may just repeat what already didn't make any sense to you, and I don't want to do that. All right? So the answer is -2 because there was a 20% increase in the quantity demanded as a result of a 10% change in the price. All elasticities are the ratio of 2 percentage changes, and they are unit-free, meaning that elasticities are not in gallons, tons, miles, dollars, or any other unit of measure. They're just a pure number. Okay, so the elasticity is -2. To what, you say? 2. That's the ratio of the cause and effect percentage changes. Okay? The ratio of the percentage change in quantity that was caused by the 10% change in price is 2. Right? The ratio of the quantity change to the price change is 2. And so it says that if there was a 1% change in price, there would be a 2% change in quantity. Okay? It's a 2-to-1 rate, which means that the demand is fairly elastic, price elastic. I went through a lot of the PowerPoints and had to add the word price in there for whatever reason. The authors of the book think that the price elasticity of demand is so dominant that it doesn't need to be called the price elasticity, just the elasticity of demand. Well, I don't agree, because there is the income elasticity of demand. Okay, the ratio of the percentage change in quantity that results from a change in price. Okay, so the income elasticity of demand is, say that's 3. That would be for like a luxury good. It means a 10% change in income will cause a 30% change in the quantity demanded. And the fact that it's positive tells you that it's not an inferior good. Okay, so there's not just the price elasticity of demand, where they just say in the book the elasticity of demand, and where the PowerPoints used to say that, and I inserted the word price in a bunch of spots. There's also the cross-price elasticity of demand. By the way, do read that appendix to Chapter 5. It's just a backside, front and backside of one sheet, 2 pages. The appendix is where they discuss the cross-price elasticity of demand and the income elasticity of demand. I'm not sure why they moved it from the body to the appendix. Maybe it was, again, that thing of price elasticity of demand. Yes, well, it is by far the most important one. But let's say you're in business producing a product, and you determine that the income elasticity of demand for your product is much larger than 1. What does that tell you? That says that your business is very sensitive to the business cycle, to the ups and downs in the economy. Okay? A high price elasticity of demand says that if the income out there changes by a little bit, your sales are going to change a lot. So it's something you better monitor then, the state of the business cycle, how well the overall economy is doing in preparing how much of your product to sell. You better ratchet down in a hurry if the economy looks like it's going downhill, because your sales are going to go down even further than the economy does as a whole, again, if your income elasticity of demand is high, much above 1. Your book calls that luxury goods. I'm not sure they're all luxury goods that work for income elasticity of demand, but it's certainly not a necessity. Right? Necessities have a low income elasticity of demand, also a low price elasticity of demand. Right? If something is an absolute, you got to have it for life to continue, a necessity, it means you're going to figure out a way to purchase it, regardless of fluctuations in income or whether the price goes up, or if it goes down, you don't buy much more of it because you're already buying all you needed. The N word. Well, see, necessities are needs. Now, beware. Just because something is a necessity doesn't necessarily mean that the price elasticity of demand is low, because there still could be close substitutes for it that, they're both necessities, but you could use one or the other. That's a mistake that's often made by sellers of supposed necessities. Whoops, My customers were able to buy it across the border that's 10 miles from here. It's a necessity, but they had the close substitute, sales in the other state that isn't that far away. Oops, there went all my customers when I thought I took advantage of that and raised my price and thought I'd make a bunch more money as a result. So anyway, necessities are often have a low price elasticity of demand, but they can have a higher price elasticity of demand if there's a nearby available item that meets the same need. And just because something is a need doesn't mean that there aren't multiple ways for it to be satisfied. I know, no PowerPoints there, right? Discussion. Assuming you've read the chapter, that you've exposed yourself to that material, that you're ready to interact on it. All right, so if we have a price elasticity of demand of 2, let's see, let's go to the next one. Oh, it's right there on the same screen. No wonder I couldn't go to it. And do remind me if I forget to go over here and switch these to your box so you can look at them later on. All right, so based on what you've already read, and we've done this question already, so we won't do it again. But based on the previous question where you have the price elasticity of demand at more than 1 in absolute value, what would you predict as a general outcome of a lower price? Let's see, price elasticity of demand means that if we change the price, the quantity demanded changes by a lot. So if we lower the price, we would expect the quantity demanded to increase by a lot. So sell it a little cheaper, we sell a lot more of it, what would we expect to happen to our revenue? Up, right? Increase. So right away, you have an advantage on the exam. If I asked this one on the exam, you'd already know the answer. You don't have to do any number crunching, right? Based on the previous question. The only answer there that has an increase in revenue is the first one. Saved yourself a little bit of time here by having the brain on, thinking through it. See, the only way you would get 1,000, let's go through the numbers again. At the original price, the quantity demanded was 100. Okay? So 10 times 100 is 1,000. That's your revenue. The only way the revenue would be still 1,000 after the lower price is if the demand is unit elastic. I'm using the terms deliberately to test your grasp of them, right? Using the terms in the book. Okay? So you wouldn't understand what I just said if you didn't know what unit elastic meant. Okay? Unit elastic means that the price elasticity of demand is 1 in absolute value. That the percentage change in quantity will exactly match the percentage change in price in terms of in percentage change terms. Okay, so which means the revenue wouldn't change, right? If the amount by which you make more on each one by selling them at a higher price is exactly offset by how many fewer you sell, your total revenue is unchanged. And see, what I'm doing here is called translation. Saying the same thing in different ways. Seeing if that helps or gets a question out of you. Gets you to terminate your river trip in Africa. Right, you know, on denial. That's the main thing that's going on in most classrooms most of the time when students are not getting it. But I'll get it eventually. I won't ask. Now I'll be embarrassed. No, it's probably not going to fix itself. That's that river journey in Africa. Denial. Denial is not just a river in Africa. All right, so let's just actually do the math to make sure that A is the right answer. At the new price of $9, the new quantity is 120. Okay, so 9 times 120 is 1,080. Confirmation. Sorry, lapsing into Cajun man there again. Confirmation of what your common sense told you based on the previous question, namely that the revenue would rise with elastic demand with a lower price. And the only answer there that has increased revenue over the $1,000 starting point is A. So that's why I say confirmation. Right? You did the math. Yep, the revenue's higher. We knew it would be higher. All that the math does is tell you by how much higher. Which is important, right? Because what would tell you that you should lower the price to $9 if this was the business you were in? The revenue went, come on, use your common sense here. It's allowed. I'm being a little sarcastic, sorry, but it's first thing in the morning. We have to wake ourselves up with a little bit of shock value sometimes. Use your common sense. The revenue just went up by $80, right? That's a smart business move if what? If the costs went up less than $80. Right? Businesses are in the business to make money. And if revenue goes up, that's not too smart if costs go up by even more than that. Costs are going to go up, aren't they? How do you know that? Again, just common sense. Unleash it. I know you're all a little, I might be wrong. Oh no. Can't let that happen. How do we know the costs are going to go up? Somebody who's daring and wants to put it out there and purge a mistake from themselves in case they're wrong. Right? It's on October 15th that you don't want to make mistakes. Right now it's cool to make mistakes, right? Because you get them out of your system. Eric, go for it. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Right, we went over this last time. No need to be what, I have a cartoon somewhere that says, my button-down student. Oh, I did it. I unbuttoned that arm. I got it up in the air to register that I actually didn't understand something. This does happen a lot, more often than people raise their hand. For most, and we discussed this a little bit last time, there are exceptions. Movie theaters, airlines to some extent, right? Selling seats in planes, seats in theaters. The cost of doing the airplane flight doesn't change much with another $150 per person, give or take, sitting in it. So there was an empty seat for them to sit in, otherwise would have been empty. A theater doesn't cost much more to show the movie if there's more people sitting in the room. But the vast majority of businesses, so those are cases where costs don't increase with sales. Okay, those are cases where you want to charge the unit elastic price, the one that's right in the middle of the demand line. Right, that's one of my previous slides. I put it on the board for reference. See, because at this price, okay, at that price, you maximize, sorry my hill should be symmetrical, it's kind of ugly looking, but at that price you maximize total revenue. Okay, if costs look like this, where are the costs and the revenues furthest apart, which means maximizing profit? Right there. Redraw this line with the slope for the vast majority of goods being slightly upward, and then maximize profit somewhere to the left for that peak. Okay, but anyway, just go back to the common sense here. Okay, if a lower price from $10 to $9 increased your revenue from $1,000 to $1,080, that's a smart business move only if your costs for producing an extra 20 tons a day from 100 to 120 increased by less than $80, right? Remember when you study economics, you know you're there when you get to duh. Right? I think that's duh, right? You made it, you got another $80 in the cash register. If your costs went up by less than $80, duh, that's a good move, at least for the short run. If it went up by more than $80, no, that wasn't a very smart move. Right? You knocked down the bottom line some. And for those of you who think profit is greed, and it is sometimes, keep in mind that in a competitive market, the maximum profit is the one that's just barely enough to keep you in business, to keep you from wishing you were doing something else. What does that mean? Keep you from wishing you were doing something. That's that opportunity cost concept that's central to economics. Right? If you're not maximizing profit in a competitive business, that means that something else you could be doing would be making you more money than what you are doing. And unless you're in the business for something other than collecting cash, and you might be, there are many people in business making less than what they could be doing elsewhere because they enjoy what they do more than their intangibles involved. But barring that, being greedy, maximizing profit is what you better do to keep yourself afloat. Now, if it's a not competitive business, well then, then all bets are off in that sense. Taking advantage of having not very many competitors can seem unethical. Then again, in most businesses, you may not have very many competitors for the moment, but unless the government's keeping them out, you probably will if you charge too much. See, and that's a check against greed. That is, well, I could get away with charging more in the short run. Price elasticity of demand is lower in the short run. Your customers will not reduce their purchases as a response to a higher price as much in the short run. Okay, so you think, well, I could get away with raising my price more in the short run, make more money. But if I do that and I start raking in the bucks, that will catch other folks' attention, and they'll enter my business, and then I'll have competitors. So maybe I better not charge too terribly much. I'll make a good profit, but not enough to be noticed too much, so as to not end up having competitors that I'd rather not have. That's called limit pricing. That's a little beyond our current chapter, but in case you were wondering if that behavior had a name, it does. Limit pricing. Not charging as much as you could get away with to maximize profit in the short run, because the price elasticity of demand is higher in the long run, and because it might attract competitors. Okay, so you settle for a smaller profit now because you think it'll help maintain profits more in the long run. All right, a little bit of a rant there to start off a Tuesday morning. Questions, comments, thoughts? Remember, I sent you that thing about that professor who, Schramm in the Wall Street Journal. I want to be a little more, try to be a little more animated. I'm going to have to go out there and be animated and hammer on somebody that's hammering. Just doing a marginal analysis thing. They shouldn't be doing that during class. All right, so let's see. We've got our second one here, and I'm not sure if I dropped that over into your thing yet. I can't remember. I think I dropped this one, but we'll do that. Okay, and we'll go up here and do attendance, and then we'll move on. So you have your devices ready. There it is. Now, as you're doing that attendance, again, I'm not intentionally waxing sarcastic, but I know that there was not 100% grasp of everything I just said. I'm 100% sure of that. Yet I see 0 hands up in the air seeking further clarification. That troubles me. Maybe it's because I'm tall and I'm still, wearing a red shirt. I don't have my devil outfit on today. I saved that for after exams only. And you guys did okay on the test. I had that on from my other class. But I said there's 100% probability that some of what I just said for many of you. What are you waiting for? Now, if you did well on the first test, maybe it's okay. You figured it out later, and your study practices are okay. You were confused at times during class, but later on you figured it out. Your test tells you that. Okay, although maybe it didn't push you hard enough. But if you didn't get a good score on that first test, it tells you need to do something differently. One of which might be to confess during class when you're not getting it. That might be one possibility, seeking clarification on the spot and not waiting till later to confirm that you really didn't grasp it. Just a thought. Okay, so there we go. We're done with the doing attendance. Half here. Okay. And do keep that in mind when you see the average on the test. Attendance is about half. So, let's see. We want to do any more of these. Let's do a couple more questions first. So let's, and then we'll jump onto the power. As you can see, I'm getting less and less enamored of going through the PowerPoint slide by slide. Seems boring. Maybe it's relatively more reassuring to you. Let's see. I should shut up so you can answer this question. We might have answered this one already. I don't remember. Maybe this is a way of testing whether you grasp what we just went over conversationally. Maybe this is the vehicle by which to go over things, just Q&A. Now, see, here's this Nile River in Africa thing. We just went over this a couple minutes ago. And if you didn't get it because you didn't answer E, maybe you should have had your hand up. See, because we talked about it's an iffy thing, right? You're making $80 extra, right? 1,080 instead of 1,000. But that's only a good idea if your costs went up less than $80 and there wasn't anything in the question that said what happened to your costs other than you knew they'd go up, right? Because of the increased quantity, but it didn't say, here's how much your costs are going to go up. So shut down immediately? I don't think so. Not from making some additional dollars, right? And besides, you didn't have to lower your price. Okay, so you could have increased it. Well, supply increased, so no, you had to lower your price. It's the new market equilibrium. Okay, see, reduced profits. That's possible, right? If your costs go up by more than $80. Increased profits. That's possible if your costs go up by less than $80. Face increased competition. Nothing there to tell you that one way or the other. That would be if you and all your other competitors saw increased profits, then you'd face additional competition. Okay, that's that limit pricing thing that we went over, although again, the limit pricing term is not something that you're responsible for yet, although I think that term does come up later in the semester. All right, so there's not enough information given yet to determine which of those answers, if any, are appropriate. Probably A is the only one. Well, no, I mean, even A is potentially possible if you're in a relatively inefficient business in that market. You might have to shut down. You can't make a living at the $9 price. Possible. Right? Your costs may go up so much more that wouldn't make any sense. All right, should I go through the reports and see how okay, see? All right, so what happened there on the increased profits? I mean, I'm asking as well as telling, I'll guess. My guess is that you equated profit and revenue. No. Additional revenue does not necessarily mean that there will be additional profit. Right? With the elastic demand, you can always increase your revenue, price elastic demand. You can always increase your revenue by lowering your price. But that doesn't make it smart, especially take a look at this. Let me draw a better version of this, what it really looks like, with a little more symmetry there. Okay, that's a little more like it. As you get near the maximum, revenues are increasing very slowly as your quantity increases. Right? So the additional revenue is probably not going to match your additional costs as you near that unit elastic price. Okay, so do not, as I'm guessing, but please correct me if you had a different answer for choosing C increased profits. I'm guessing that you saw revenue and profit as being synonymous. Okay, it's not. Profit is total revenue minus total cost. Okay, there are expenses, and then there are incoming dollars, and the maximum profit, just a second, and the maximum profit is where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay, so where the additional revenue just barely covers the additional cost, says that's the right quantity. Question?
So would you say that revenue is kind of like the PPF, and where you're assuming that if your costs don't increase and you sell everything in your inventory, this is what you'll make? That's what revenue is, while profit is?
No, I wouldn't know. I guess I'm not getting the connection to the PPF, the production possibility frontier. I guess the thing sort of has the same shape in a way, except the PPF looks like this. See, the production possibility frontier looks like this. We'll make an X there, Y, and X. So, see, one up here you have a total revenue, or if it's a demand line, you have price. So, follow up on that after class if we're trains passing in the night. I may not have helped you out there, but I'm not seeing that connection that you made there. Appreciate the attempt, though, really, because I prefer Q&A over lecture any day, any time. More. Okay. Anybody want to talk about why they answered reduced profit or additional competition? And it may be that the increase in supply was based on that. Maybe that was the assumption you made. Don't know. All right. Let's go on to the next one. Now we've changed the data now. Okay? So don't assume the same data. Reread the question. The data is no longer exactly the same. Now the quantity only goes up to 108. I suppose I could have had you figure the elasticity. Well, why don't we do that? Well, it's not one of the top hat questions, or if it is, maybe it's the next one. But after you answer this question, test yourself, do the math, find the price elasticity of demand based on those numbers. I guarantee there'll be one or more of those on the exam and the homework. So, get those things out of your system as quickly as possible, right? The possible mistakes. Those I thought you meant. The deadliest phrase in the English language, right? Doc, but I thought you meant. No, I didn't mean that. Why didn't you raise your hand so I could have corrected that? I guess you do have to find the elasticity kind of, sort of. Not exactly. You could just guesstimate it to answer this question. Now, if you're struggling with this one, kind of introspect a little bit and say, why am I struggling? Why am I struggling with this? I read the book. I showed up Thursday for the lecture. We went over this. Why am I struggling? I don't know what this word means. Or what to do with these numbers. Okay, maybe you saved the practicing of it for later. All right. Maybe you shouldn't have. Maybe you should have done a couple of these while you were waiting for class to start when you were doing other things, which I notice as I come into class sometimes are interesting way to get ready for class. All right, enough of that, and we'll show the answer. Okay, you see, if you figured the elasticity, right, it came out to be less than 1. Okay, less than 1 means you're on the lower half of the demand line. Okay, what is the elasticity? It's 0.8, right? There's an 8% change in quantity as a result of the 10% change in price. 8% divided by 10% is 0.8. Yeah, negative 0.8. Remember, most of the time we don't care about the negative. We know it. Sometimes using it in a formula, yes, we better keep track of the 0.8. But most of the time it's the elasticity, whatever it is, the absolute value is good enough. Not so with the cross-price elasticity of demand. The sign is a big piece of the information. A cross-price elasticity of demand is positive for consumption substitutes, negative for consumption complements. For close consumption substitutes, it's large positive. It's a cross-price elasticity of demand, Doc. Oh, it's the change in the quantity of one good in response to the change of the price of another good. Like the change in the purchases of apples if the price of oranges goes up. Those are consumption substitutes, right? Okay, you would expect the sales of apples to go up, but the price of oranges goes up, right? Positive number, right? A higher price means a higher price for oranges means a higher quantity for apples. Okay, so consumption substitutes, price goes up. Okay, we'll get back to that a little bit later on. It's kind of dividing your focus between these two. All right, so you found the elasticity, which I guess I could have had that as a separate question. You had to do that to find this. 108 is 8% bigger than 100, and this is still that 10% change from starting from $10. Let's try another one. It's not one of the questions here, but just again to test your comfort level. Using the midpoint formula, right? Just a second ago I used the point formula in finding that it's 0.8. Use the midpoint formula. You said, Doc, what's a midpoint formula? Well, again, we did go over that last time, and I am assuming you read the book. You should have some idea what a midpoint formula is. Okay, the midpoint formula to find this elasticity. Take a couple seconds here. Yes?
Why does the elasticity have anything to do with that? I mean, you could just drop the price and it just go down to the lower.
You're saying, why is the elasticity lower here than, say, here?
Yeah, because I mean, you can be 8%, but if the price goes up, it can still be an 8% change in.
Okay, that's a good question. See, when we do the elasticity, of price elasticity demand, and I'll use the point formula simply because it's easier for me to write it out. Okay, we have the change in quantity, okay, before, after minus before, okay, and then we have, for the point formula, we have the original quantity, okay, to get the percentage change in quantity. And then here we have the percentage change in price, and we have the original price. Okay, so let's just say we hold this constant and we say, okay, 10%. Or, no, let's not do that. What's true about the lower half of the demand line? Price is lower. Okay, so any given change in price will be a bigger percentage change. In other words, a change of $2 when the price is $4 is a 50% change. Whereas if the price is way up here and you change the price $2, well, that's starting from, say, $10. That's only a 20% change. Okay, so the lower the price is, the bigger the denominator of this elasticity is going to be, and so the smaller the elasticity. Okay, so a $2 change down here is a much bigger change in percentage change in price than a $2 change up there. And likewise on the quantity, same thing. The quantity here is what? Pi, right? Okay, further over that way. So this is going to be a bigger number, and so any given amount of change is going to be a smaller percentage change. Cool. All right, this is how you learn this stuff. Not by reading it. Well, you have to do that first. Okay, it's by looking at it, staring at it, thinking about it. Ah, bingo, insight. It went to duh, time to move on. Not there yet? Keep staring at it, keep thinking about it, running examples through your head. All right, let's see how we did here on the, okay. All right, well, you know, no, it's not in the upper half, anyway, so. Let's go on to the next one. All right, I did these backwards, didn't I? All right, you had to know that this one you had to know that one to do the previous one. Got those in wrong order. There it is. You don't need to put in the right answer once you know it. It's called risk-averse behavior. Maybe he's checking these for grades later in the semester. Well, you know the NFL, they have tiebreakers for making the playoffs. You know, like the 10th tiebreaker is maybe how often they participated in the top hat stuff, and then like the 11th was is how often were they right and wrong. So, yeah, okay, I can understand the risk aversion there. We'll move on, though. All right, so same data as the previous one. By the way, do email me later if you think this mode of discussion is better than just trolling through PowerPoints. We'll do some of that later because I want to see if I covered everything that I think I need to hit upon. But this seems to be at least a little more interactive and engaging than the Merrifield drone. It's not working for you, though. Tell me. I'm not interested in doing something for my own edification. I'm here to serve. Okay, let's zap this for now. All right, so what did we determine in the last couple of them? We have inelastic demand. Okay, 0.8, less than 1. So if we lower prices and there's not much response to changes in price because the demand is inelastic, what should we forecast in terms of which way on the revenue? If we lower our price and it's inelastic, it means we're not going to sell that many more at the lower price. Right? That's what that means. Okay? Not responsive to change in price is what inelastic means. So yeah, we'll sell more at the lower price, but not a lot more. So just based on that, what answer should you have given without processing any numbers? Right? You should predict just from the nature of elasticity, understanding what it is and what it means. Oh, the revenue is going to go down. Now you could approach this, too many people do, by memorizing, if the demand is inelastic, revenues and costs move in opposite directions, and revenues move down when demand is inelastic and price is lowered. That's a lot to keep straight, isn't it? If you don't understand it, there's too many of those in your head floating around at the same time, and you won't do it. So you need to think your way through it. Sadly, I think there's too much, way too much memorization going on. In grad students, I see this. I think by the time they've gotten through school and they're on to semi-proficient, they're still memorizing stuff they don't understand. All right. So anyway, what's the math here? 108 times 9 is 972. Right? The new price times the new quantity. As the elasticity led you to predict is lower. The math just tells you by how much lower. Is there any way that this could be a good idea? Well, let's not steal the thunder here totally, because that's what the next question gets at. It being the lower price given the inelastic demand. Tyler, you could draw those on a piece of paper. Air graphs tend to not work all that well. You might be a practicing environmentalist trying to save paper. I tell that to my classes sometimes. I'm a radical right-wing environmentalist, and this would use up a scrap of paper. And I can get by without that. Oh, that kills trees. Really, I'm not being sarcastic. I think those thoughts. Wait a minute, did you say radical right-wing environmentalist? Yeah, I did say that. Remember, Republicans are too liberal for me. So I'm an environmentalist, but I'm still a radical right-winger at it. I'll explain sometime later in the semester exactly what that means, because there's a chapter on spillovers, environmental. We'll get into that there. All right. Let's go ahead and do that. See, now some of you answered E because you thought, well, this question looks familiar. It's the same as before, just the same amount of information. Not enough information. Let's see what. Afraid to look, but this is how we get these mistakes out of our. Yeah, see. By the way, if you do this in getting ready for the final exam, you are going to tank big time and deserve to. In fact, that's probably even true for the exams, because I reuse a lot of questions. Oh, I remember this one. The answer was E last time. Ooh, the question changed. It teensy weensy bit. The word "not" was inserted in there, changing the answer. See what happened here? We changed elastic to inelastic, and that changed the answer, even though we had the same amount of information. We have enough information now. With inelastic demand, we know that revenues and costs are going to move in the opposite direction. We already know the revenues are down. And we know when we lower price, quantity goes up. We'll sell more. That increases our cost. Are we to duh? Revenue is down, cost is up. Is that smart? No. We don't need to know by how much costs went up. We did need to know that for the elastic demand. We did need to know by how much the costs went up to see if it went up by more than the revenues went up. With elastic demand, the costs and the revenues move in the same direction. Then we've got to do that marginal analysis that we did back in Chapter 1, or at least mentioned for the first time in Chapter 1, where we look at additional revenue versus additional cost, and we weigh whether we went far enough or too far and what the right amount is. And we don't need to do that with inelastic demand. Revenue down, cost is up. No brainer. Don't do that. Don't lower your prices when it's not going to yield a whole lot of additional sales, right? There's several different ways to say it. Say it several different ways before you realize, that wasn't very smart. Yeah, we've got to provide for those additional sales by making more. That will increase our costs, and we'll have fewer dollars going into the cash register. Not smart. Let's see. Go to the next one here and see if we're past where we left off last time yet. Yeah, I think we are. We'll not do this one yet. So disable submissions there. Let's see. How many of these did I go through before I stopped? This one was ESQ1. So let me get the rest of these into your box that we did go over there before I forget. All right. Now I'm going to try something just a little different here for having gone through some of these already. I'm going to push the forward button real slowly, okay, up to the point where we left off. Stop me along the way if you remember, I didn't get this one last time, thought I'd figure it out between Thursday and Tuesday, didn't figure it out, Doc, help. Okay, so that's the reason to go over it slowly. All right, so let's see, that one. It's a good idea to go over these between classes. Works a lot better than if you wait 3 weeks and then you don't remember that you had issues. Doesn't take long. It's not a big deal. Here's a slide where you could practice finding the elasticity by the midpoint formula and the point formula, just to practice the formulas and to compare the difference. Let's see. Let's do the steeper line and use the point formula. See, now if you're thinking, what did he ask me to do? See, there's a little insight already. You don't know what the point formula is. Right? Some part of that instruction, you go, huh? What do I do? Yeah, that means you're a little weak on some of the terms that you need to, right? That's when you get on the test and you're reading that question and you don't know what the question is, never mind which one of the answers is the right one. Okay, so what does going with the steeper line mean in terms of the point formula? Well, let's figure out this first. Let's get rid of this here. Okay, so the change in quantity is what? 5. Okay, and the starting point was 80, so 5 divided by 80 is your change in quantity divided by the original quantity, which is your percentage change. I can't do that math in my head. I know it's 1/16. Exactly what percent that is, I don't know. And let's see, the percentage change in price that caused that was a change in price from 40 to 50. So that would be, and let's see, which one was the original one? It was 40. Okay, so at this point you can already do a little talking your way through it. You go, aha! A 25% change in price caused a, whatever 5 divided by 80 is in percentage terms, change in quantity. Does anybody have that on their calculator? What's 5 divided by 80? It's, huh? Yeah, I know, but in percentage terms. 5 divided by 80, what does that look like on your calculator? 0.0 something. Huh? 0.0625? Okay. So, a 25% change in price. See, I can do this in my head. This is 1/4, 25%. A 25% change in price causes a 6.25% change in the quantity demanded. Sure enough, just as the slide here says, it's pretty darn inelastic demand, right? 6.25 divided by 25. What is that about? Well, it's exactly 1/4. The elasticity is 0.25. Okay, now let's do it by the midpoint formula and figure out it'll be a little different. You'll still have the same number up here, but by the midpoint formula, let's see, you have the 5 here. And then if we've left out some minus signs, let's see, that would be a lower price, so this would be minus. Okay, so you get negative elasticity. What's this here? This would be the midpoint between 75 and 80. So this would be, okay, if you remember the formula, you add the two together, 75 and 80, and then you divide by 2. Okay, 77 and a half. You get the midpoint. Okay, and then over here, you get just have the 10. Okay, and then the midpoint between 40 and 50 is 45. See, it's not so intimidating. Midpoint formula, point formula, you know, ooh, a lot of math, ooh, a bunch of adds and subtracts and some divide. No, don't scare yourself out of something that's easy. Okay, so what does that math turn out to be? That's 5 divided by 77.5 is a little bit more than 6.25%. And then whatever that number is, divided by whatever 10 divided by 45 is. Huh? That's halfway between 75 and 80. Yeah, adding them together and dividing by 2 is what the formula tells you to do. It just gives you halfway in between the two of them. Right? He asked that question, and I looked around as I gave my answer. Several people's pens were moving. Now, they may have been writing something else, but see, they're glad you asked that question because they're still buttoned down in fear of who knows what. And they had the same questions. They're looking at their neighbors. Where'd that 77.5 come from? Yeah, they want to ask him. Oh, no, don't want to interrupt the doc. Come on, get with it. Don't let it go by if you don't get it. By the way, so that means thank you for asking that question for others. And if online is your preferred medium, do that. That's been underutilized. If you're scared to ask questions here in front of everybody else, you're not sure you have a question, and later you figure it out, post it online. People will go there and be glad, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. They'll be eavesdropping electronically and be glad for the exchange. All right. So I can't do the math in my head for that, but it's probably a little different than the 0.25 we got before. If it's much different, you did some math wrong. All right, so as I said, I'm going to go through these slowly. That wasn't all that slowly, was it? But anyway, we'll continue to go through these. We discussed this in terms of several examples last time. Okay, I gave it my best shot. I'm sure that it didn't work for everybody. It never does. There's always, I thought you meant, in communication among people. Want to ask about how any of these matter for elasticity and why they do matter the way they allegedly do? Okay, so here's a little summary table. Are you going to memorize this for October 15th? I hope not. I hope not. But Okay, so here's this, I guess, potentially, well, no, it's not intimidating looking yet. Anyway, here's where it says that it's just a ratio of 2 percentage changes. Okay, and here's an example. Okay, so 5%, 10% change in price caused a 5% change in quantity, and the elasticity is 0.5 in absolute value. A pure number, no units. Oh yeah, I remember we talked about this cigarette thing, and one of you, or several of you, but one of you said so, that you thought it was kind of weird that a 70% tax would cause a 88 cent increase in the price. It is weird. Anyway, we did the math here, and we said, yeah, wow. Younger folks are a little more sensitive to prices than older folks who have probably have more money and have become addicted, so a lower elasticity for the adults than the kiddos. I questioned the 0.17, not because that thinking isn't valid, namely the adults have become somewhat addicted and so are not going to be that sensitive to price, but I questioned it because of that state line thing. See, this is about Kentucky having a change in price. Well, a lot of Kentuckians live close to Indiana and live close to Tennessee and live close to Ohio and other states that border Kentucky. I guarantee you that a 70% or 70 cent increase in the price of cigarettes, okay, or in this case, they allege 88 cents, would cause some folks to pile up cigarettes on the other side of the border when they're visiting friends there. Now, maybe the other states have even higher taxes, but some of them, I suspect, have lower. So what does that mean? That means that their cigarettes may not have close available substitutes, per se, but cigarettes sold in Kentucky do. Cigarettes sold in Tennessee are almost identical substitutes. The only difference is the distance you have to travel to get them, which if you live right on the border isn't much, and if you're already there and for some other reason, it's no hassle at all. Right? No opportunity cost if you're there for some other reason you had to. And oh, by the way, the cigarettes are cheaper here. Buy them here. So I wonder about that 0.017. That would be probably true for a national cigarette tax, but I doubt if it's true for any cigarette tax for any state. More substitutes available locally than nationally. All right, so here's this graph, and I just drew it again on the board today, just to have it there to refer to. Okay, here's the one that looks, by that formula at the bottom. Because there's a lot of terms in it. Oh, math, oh no. And then, the excuses, oh, I'm not good at math, and oh, no, and, tears and sweat and all. I've literally seen people sweat and put a math problem in front of them. There's beads start to pop out. You gotta back away from that. I mean, there's math worth sweating about. This is not it. Okay, finding the midpoint between two numbers, taking their average, that's all that is. It's not a big deal. Now, I do question where they say Q before versus minus Q after. It doesn't make any difference for the midpoint formula. But if you use the point formula, you better do the after on the bottom at least, not the before. I'm sorry, use the before on the bottom for the here, not the after. Okay, the starting point is the basis for measuring a percentage change. If you get a raise from $8 an hour to $9 an hour, your determination of how much of a raise you got is $1 versus the $8 starting point, not versus the $9 now that you have. Okay? All right, so here's a demonstration of the midpoint formula that we went over last time. Just did another version of it here for this slide 3 that we had on the screen a few minutes ago. Okay, we've been talking about the connection to revenue. Yeah, price times quantity is revenue, and price and quantity move in opposite directions. Whoops. Yeah, makes it tough. Okay, we've been going over this. Yeah, the opposite of the question that we went over is, suppose your demand is inelastic and you raise your price. Revenue rises as price rises with price inelastic demand. Again, a no-brainer. right? Because when you raise your price, if your revenue rises, that's good, right? What about costs? Well, if it's inelastic, when the inelastic yields that result of higher revenue, if you raise your price, quantity is going to be down, so your costs are going to be down. Or if you're in the movie theater, airline type business, at least it's not going to change. So if your demand is inelastic, price inelastic, you should raise your price. All else equal. Boy, there's an important phrase. See, a lot of businesses don't just sell one product, right? So maybe the higher price will make you about the same amount of revenue on that product, but because fewer people come into the store, they don't buy as much other stuff. You lose money on other sales that you no longer make. Well, maybe all else equal wasn't equal. You've heard of loss leader advertising. Well, sometimes businesses plan to lose money on a given product by offering it really cheap, figuring to get those folks in the store, maybe they'll buy other stuff and more than they got for that loss on that one. That's when you get to the store and it's all sold out. But you're already there, right? So your opportunity cost to buy stuff is zero. You're there in the store, but you can buy other things, even though you're mad, because they ran out of the reason that you came there. Oops. Okay, here's another one. There's my little, I took their slide and managed to squeeze my version of this on the upper part there. Okay, so there it is. If you start on the lower half of the demand line, it means you're on this part of the revenue curve, right? Higher prices move you that way, right? Higher prices mean lower quantity move you that way, higher revenue. But eventually you'll get to where the demand is elastic, keep raising your price, and then the revenue will start going down. And then you're in the marginal analysis zone, as I call it, right? The elastic part of the demand line, revenues and costs move in the same direction. So it depends on which one changes the most, whether you should keep going. But you should get off of the inelastic part. I know that sounds weird because that's where you can raise your price and make more money. But you keep raising your price and making more money until you're on the elastic portion. Now, as the book points out, some industries are on the elastic portion because they're competitive and the individual sellers can't choose the price that they charge. They have to go with the equilibrium price. Farming, for example. Okay, so when the supply increases in farming, the farmers make less money. Yeah. Less revenue and more cost. Yeah. And they're totally helpless against it. You think farmers would celebrate when the weather's great and there's a bumper crop? No, they're not celebrating. Because it means the market price will be lower, and at the lower price, the sales won't be up much in elastic demand. And the revenues will be lower, and they'll have spent more money harvesting their crop because they have more crop to harvest. So their costs will be up. Sometimes, that's why you read this, because they plow under some of their crop. Yeah. Sounds bizarre, but saving the cost of collecting it isn't worth it at some point at the lower price. Yeah, here's another table. Somehow, having done this as long as I have, I can picture people at home. Memorize this. Please don't. I'm not in the torture business. At least I don't aim to be. I'm like, Doc, but you're torturing me. Well, not trying to. Trying to get you out of that mode, try to get you into the duh mode. Right? Now I know you're not at duh, but that's the road you want to be on. Right? It was so unclear to begin with, and I just figured out what all the words meant and practiced a little bit. It makes perfect sense now. Economics, the painful elaboration of the obvious. Right? The duh at the end. Yeah, it's obvious. Well, not until you get all the terminology straight and you practice the math a few times, then it can get to that point. If you don't do that, then you have to either memorize what you don't understand, which highly recommended against. Here's the slide about the farmers. Okay, farmer has worked himself out of a job. Of course, not all farmers, right? The equilibrium price can't be the equilibrium price unless it's okay for the majority of sellers and buyers. But it's true, if the supply increases and the price goes down and the revenue goes down for the industry as a whole, some farmers will suffer severely because they may be marginal producers. What's a marginal producer? Well, the ones that are just barely surviving at the going rate, the first going rate before the supply increased, and the price goes down, and they're done. Okay, so yeah, some American farmers, the least efficient, which sadly tend to be the ones that have been around the longest, the family farms, can't compete with the corporate farms, and they're the ones that are driven out of business by the business as a whole becoming increasingly efficient technology-wise and such. And then there's the war on drugs, which your book also talks about, and wonder why drug interdiction doesn't seem to have put much of a dent in it. That's because at the reduced supply, the price is higher, and those who are able to survive the government's efforts, make money hand over fist, those become the drug lords with the little mini kingdoms and the little armies because they have tons of money. Of course, then they become increasingly hard to find, to prosecute, to catch, and such, because they bribe people to protect them and such. Okay? So all that's the result of the low price elasticity of demand for drugs, and our government's well-intentioned efforts to reduce the supply just increases the price a lot, increases the revenue a lot for those who remain in the drug-selling business. In effect, drug interdiction is sort of a government-enforced cartel, keeping out of business those least able to escape government's efforts, keeping in business and enriching massively those best skilled, most skilled at avoiding government capture. Why do we keep doing it? Well, that's a good question. Why don't we do something different? It's a good question. It's quite a, Google that sometime. There's quite a debate on the alternatives to attacking the supply of drugs. Okay, here's some basic, do you get it kinds of questions. I guess I could have made these into the top hat questions. Yeah, it's good enough for discussion. What's the basic point here under the first bullet item? A Dell computer has a lot more close substitutes than computers generally, right? You're probably going to, in this world, hey, you know, a computer, some sort of a device, getting on the internet's getting to be a need. A Dell computer is one way to address that need. I was talking about earlier. It may be a need, but the elasticity, the price elasticity can be still high because there are many alternate competing ways to meet that need. An Apple computer, for example, is a close and available substitute for a Dell computer or an IBM computer or whatever, any of the number of brands that you see on the shelf at the local store selling computers. Price elasticity of demand for eggs, I didn't realize it was that low. I guess people need their egg fix. If egg producers all raise their prices, see, that's a key because the producer of eggs has close available substitutes, other producers of eggs. But if somehow they managed to form a cartel and all agreed to raise their prices, they'd make a lot more money. Okay? If they raise their price by any percent, if that elasticity is true, their total revenue would increase a lot. And their profits would increase a lot because it would slightly reduce their quantity and therefore their costs. And if a fashionable clothing store raises its prices by 25%, it means that they think that the price elasticity of demand has probably gone down. Why would that happen? Let's have a look at a graph on the board, see why that might happen. Okay, so this is the current price. All right. An increase in income could cause this shift in demand, right? So, unless it's an inferior good. Looking at that formula over there, what's different about point B versus point A? Quantity, the price is the same, right? But the quantity is larger. So you're going to get a lower elasticity, right? Everything else is the same. Slope of the line is the same. The change in quantity is the same. Per any given change in price is going to be the same. Okay? Slope of the line is the same. The only difference is price is the same between point A and B. The only difference is the quantity is larger. Okay? And it's on the denominator of the numerator, indicating a smaller numerator, right? So a lower elasticity. The lower the elasticity, the higher the optimal price. Okay, so when a store succeeds at increasing the demand for their products, say through advertising, same thing, increased demand, right? It means the elasticity at the price they're charging will be lower than it used to be. So they should slightly increase their price, maybe not 25%, but some increase in price is warranted. Now, why do they advertise? In part to firm up their price. Right? If sales are down, it says maybe they better cut your price. Well, advertise. That'll firm up the price. Questions, comments? Okay. Here we are into a relatively new territory. There's really not any reason to go much slower through these new slides. Price elasticity of supply. It's basically the same idea, only now we're looking at the supply line, but it's elastic means there's a big response to price. Okay, but now we're talking about the suppliers making more available. And inelastic means there's not much of a response to change in price. The suppliers only making a little bit more available at a higher price than at a lower price. Same thing as that earlier slide. Okay, the steeper line, all else equal, has the lower elasticity. Have a look at that later on. There are factors that are deterministic of whether elasticity is larger or smaller. Time horizon, same as before. More time to adjust means what? More adjustment. Okay, and therefore a higher elasticity. And then the change in the per unit cost is the big one, versus whereas demand, it was closest to availability of substitutes. What does that mean? That means if it costs a lot more to make it, if we make more of it, yeah, we're not going to make a whole lot more of it. In translation. And what does it mean, Doc? Should I remember? No, think about what it means and say it in different words. Luckily, the period's about 5 minutes left. My voice seems to be on the fizzle. We'll do some examples of those later on. So, the share of market for the inputs is kind of the same as the other one, share of income. Right? If the price goes up and the seller says, I should make more, and they go out to buy more resources to make more, and the price of those resources doesn't change because that seller is a small part of the market, cool. But if their share of the market for the inputs is high, then if they go out and try to buy more resources to make more stuff, that might drive up the price of their inputs, and that kind of put a brake on their ability to supply more. Okay, there's what to think about in terms of grasping that item on the list rather than memorization. No, don't do that. Geographic scope, we'll talk about that when we get to the gun buyback program, which comes back, it's in your book, and that comes up a little bit later in these slides. Okay, so anyway, here it discusses each of those three items on the list. And here it just simply states, the wider the scope of the market, the less elastic demand. So if you think of that gun buyback program, which we won't get to today, you think, let's see, if we have a national gun buyback program, what's different than if we have a local one? Well, local ones means people can import guns from other places to sell to the government that's doing the gun buyback program because they think it'll reduce crime. Nationally, to do that, we'd have to import guns from other countries, which we probably do, which we probably would do some of as a result of higher prices, but not nearly to the extent that it's because there aren't any barriers to importing from other cities or even other states, right? You drive your car there and drive it back. There are no customs inspectors like there are at the national border for stuff coming in from other countries. Okay, so here's another one of those tables that, yes, we need to summarize. Yes, we need to look at all the possibilities, and we need to think about each one of them. Not somehow magically try to remember all of those combinations. They pile up fast. Same basic idea, right? It's still, we could erase this, put an S here. Same formula. Okay, now it's quantity supplied instead of quantity demanded. Now we're looking at the supply line, but other than that, it's the same basic idea. All elasticities involve finding the ratio of two percentage changes. So you're going to have to find two percentage changes and then divide the effect, the change in quantity, by the cause, which is the change in price. Some questions will be as simple as, hey, where we figure the percentage change for you and just tell you, okay, you just need to know which one to divide by which other one. One of the wrong answers will be 3 1/3. Okay, that's if you divide 10 divided by 3. You do it the wrong way. And let's see, mathematics of it is the same thing, only now we're talking about quantity supplied. There's a point formula and there's a midpoint formula, same one. Use the point formula in real life for small changes in the price and therefore the likely small changes in the quantity. Use the midpoint formula if there's a big change in the price and therefore likely a big change in the quantity. And that's slide 38, and that's where we'll pick up next time. You can see there's 10 left, but some of those are just overview and summary slides. So we'll be into chapter 6 next time. Please skim it at least before Thursday.